The cafe was alive with the hum of conversations, the clinking of cups, and the faint hiss of the espresso machine. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small, cozy place tucked between two towering skyscrapers in the heart of New York City. The kind of spot where office workers grabbed their morning coffee or hurried through a quick lunch before heading back to their desks. But today, it had an unexpected visitor. Robert Grayson sat at a corner table near the window, his tailored suit making him stand out like a diamond in a pile of pebbles. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his leather shoes gleamed under the soft glow of the overhead lights. He was used to dining in high-end restaurants with white tablecloths and waitstaff who knew his name. But today he found himself here in this modest cafe because fate, or maybe just bad luck, had led him here. His usual lunch spot, a fine French bistro downtown, had been closed for renovations. His driver, unsure of what else to suggest, had dropped him off here instead. Robert hadn't complained. After all, even billionaires needed to eat, and this place seemed clean enough. Still, as he glanced around at the worn wooden tables and mismatched chairs, he couldn't help but feel slightly out of place. A young woman approached his table, balancing a tray laden with plates and cups. She was slim, with light brown hair, pulled back into a loose ponytail. Her apron was slightly stained, and her hands moved quickly as she set down a plate of food in front of him. "Here you go," she said with a polite smile. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if she didn't want to draw too much attention to herself. "Thank you," Robert replied, nodding briefly. He picked up his fork and began eating, barely paying attention to her as she turned to leave. But then something caught his eye. A faint line on her wrist, visible as her sleeve slipped down slightly. It was a scar, thin and pale, running diagonally across her skin. For a moment, Robert froze, his fork hovering mid-air. That scar, it looked so familiar. Too familiar. Memories flooded back, unbidden and unwelcome. Memories of a day 20 years ago when his life had changed forever. A day at the beach, laughter ringing in the air, and then chaos, panic, despair. His infant daughter, Emma, taken from him in an instant. Authorities had searched for weeks, months even, but no trace of her was ever found. Eventually, they declared her dead, though no body was recovered. Robert had spent years clinging to hope, only to be crushed by the weight of reality. He shook his head, trying to clear the thoughts. It was ridiculous to think that this young woman could have any connection to his past. And yet, the scar. It was exactly where he remembered it being on Emma's tiny wrist after a minor accident when she was just a few months old. The doctors had assured him it would fade over time, but now sitting here in this cafe he couldn't ignore the eerie resemblance. The waitress returned a few minutes later to refill his coffee cup. This time Robert studied her more closely. Her face was plain, not particularly memorable, but there was something about her eyes. They were warm, kind, and carried a hint of sadness. She noticed him looking and offered another small smile. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her tone polite but cautious. "Yes, fine," Robert said quickly, forcing himself to sound casual. "Just enjoying the meal." He paused, debating whether to ask her name. "You work here often?" She nodded. "Yeah, I've been working here for a couple of years now. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills." Robert gave a slight chuckle, though his mind was racing. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Lily. Lily Carter." "Well, thank you, Lily. You've been very attentive." "No problem," she replied, giving him one last smile before walking away to tend to another customer. As Robert watched her go, his thoughts churned. Could it really be possible? Was this young woman somehow connected to the daughter he had lost so long ago, or was he letting his grief cloud his judgment, seeing connections where none existed? He finished his meal slowly, savoring each bite, but his mind was elsewhere. By the time he left the cafe, he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't forget Lily Carter anytime soon. Over the next few days, Robert found himself thinking about her constantly. He tried to focus on work, attending meetings and reviewing financial reports, but his thoughts kept drifting back to that scar, those eyes, and the possibility that lingered in the back of his mind. Finally, unable to resist, he decided to return to the cafe, not for the food but for answers. On his second visit, he chose a different seat closer to the counter where the staff gathered during lulls in service. Sure enough, Lily was there, chatting quietly with another waitress. Robert ordered a sandwich and a coffee, deliberately taking his time to eat. When Lily came over to check on him, he seized the opportunity. "You seem familiar," he said casually, leaning back in his chair. "Have we met before?" Lily frowned, tilting her head slightly. "I don't think so. I'd remember someone like you." Robert chuckled, though inside his heart was pounding. "Funny, I was going to say the same about you. Do you mind if I ask how old you are?" "I'm 22, she replied, her expression curious but guarded. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, no reason," Robert said with a dismissive wave. "Just making conversation. So Lily, tell me, what's your story? Where are you from?" For a moment she hesitated, as if unsure how much to share. Then she shrugged. "I grew up in foster care. Moved around a lot as a kid. Don't really know much about my parents. I was found near a beach when I was little, and that's pretty much all I know." Robert's breath caught in his throat. A beach, found as a child. It was too coincidental. But he didn't say anything, afraid of scaring her off. Instead, he nodded sympathetically. "That must have been tough, growing up without knowing your roots." "It was," Lily admitted. "But I try not to dwell on it. Life's better now. I've got friends, a job. It's enough." "Still," Robert pressed gently, "don't you ever wonder about who your parents were, where you came from?" Lily's gaze flickered downward, and for a brief moment she looked vulnerable. "Sometimes," she admitted softly. "But wondering doesn't change anything, does it?" Robert wanted to tell her right then and there that he might be the answer to her questions, that he might be her father. But he held back, knowing it wasn't the right time. Instead, he smiled warmly. "Well, if you ever decide you want to find out more, let me know. I happen to know a few people who specialize in tracing family histories." Lily raised an eyebrow, amused. "Are you offering to play detective for me?" "Something like that," Robert said with a wink. "Consider it a free consultation." She laughed lightly, shaking her head. "Thanks, but I think I'll pass, for now anyway." As she walked away, Robert felt a mix of frustration and determination. He needed proof, concrete evidence, before he could confront her. And so, he resolved to dig deeper, to uncover the truth no matter what it took. Little did he know, his journey was only beginning, and it would lead him to discoveries far greater than he could have imagined. The days that followed Robert Grayson's second visit to the cafe were a blur of restless nights and endless questions. He couldn't shake the feeling that Lily Carter was somehow connected to his past, no matter how hard he tried to push it aside. The scar on her wrist, the story about being found near a beach as a child, it all pointed to one possibility. She might be Emma, the daughter he had lost 20 years ago. But Robert knew better than to jump to conclusions. He needed proof, something solid to confirm his suspicions. Sitting in his penthouse office late one evening, he picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. On the other end of the line, a familiar voice answered. "Mr. Grayson," said the man on the phone, sounding surprised but professional. "It's been a while." "Yes, it has," Robert replied. "I need your help, James. Something personal." James Harper was one of the best private investigators in the city. Over the years, he had worked for Robert on various matters, from corporate espionage to background checks on potential business partners. But this time, the request was different, and deeply personal. "I want you to look into someone," Robert continued. "A young woman named Lily Carter. She works at a cafe downtown. I'll send you the address." "What am I looking for?" James asked, his tone curious. "Anything you can find," Robert said firmly. "Her background, family history, medical records if possible. Pay special attention to any information about her childhood, where she was born, where she grew up, anything unusual." James hesitated for a moment before responding. You know this could take some time, right? And depending on what we're dealing with, it might not be easy to get everything. I understand, Robert said. Money isn't an issue. Just do whatever it takes. After hanging up, Robert leaned back in his chair, staring out at the glittering skyline of New York City. He felt a mix of hope and dread swirling inside him. What if James found nothing? What if Lily truly wasn't Emma? The thought of losing her again, this time after coming so close, was almost unbearable. Over the next few weeks, Robert made a habit of visiting the cafe regularly. Sometimes he came for breakfast, sometimes for lunch, always careful not to make it seem like he was stalking her. Each time he engaged Lily in small talk, learning little bits and pieces about her life. She told him about growing up in foster care, moving from home to home, never staying in one place for too long. She spoke about how lonely it had been, how she often dreamed of finding her real parents but eventually gave up because it seemed impossible. Lily, for her part, noticed Robert's frequent visits. At first, she thought it was just coincidence, that maybe he liked the food or enjoyed the quiet atmosphere of the cafe. But as the days turned into weeks, she began to wonder, why would a man like him, someone who clearly belonged in a world far removed from hers, keep coming back to this tiny cafe? One afternoon, as she refilled his coffee cup, she decided to ask. You come here a lot, she said casually, trying to sound nonchalant. Is there something special about this place? Robert looked up, caught off guard by her question. Not really, he replied with a smile. I guess I just like the view. The view? Lily raised an eyebrow, glancing toward the window. Outside, the street was crowded with pedestrians and cars honking impatiently. Must be some fancy glasses you're wearing. Robert chuckled. Maybe it's the company that keeps me coming back. Lily blushed slightly, unsure how to respond. There was something charming about him, despite his polished appearance and obvious wealth. He didn't treat her like she was invisible, the way some customers did. Instead, he seemed genuinely interested in talking to her, hearing her stories, even laughing at her jokes. Still, something about him felt mysterious. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was a sadness in his eyes, a weight that suggested he carried burdens she couldn't imagine. It made her curious and cautious. Meanwhile, James Harper was hard at work uncovering details about Lily's past, tracking down records for someone who had spent most of their life in foster care. Wasn't easy, but James was persistent. After countless phone calls, interviews, and late-night research sessions, he finally pieced together enough information to present to Robert. They met in a quiet corner of a high-end restaurant, away from prying ears. James slid a folder across the table, his expression serious. I think you'll find this interesting, he said. Robert opened the folder, his hands trembling slightly. Inside were documents detailing Lily's early years, hospital records, police reports, and notes from social workers. According to the files, a toddler matching Lily's description had been found wandering alone near a beach in Maine when she was around 2 years old. She had been wearing a torn dress and bore a distinctive scar on her wrist, the result of a minor injury sustained months earlier, according to medical records. As Robert flipped through the pages, his heart raced. Everything matched. The age, the location, the scar. It was all too perfect to be a coincidence. But there was more. One of the documents mentioned DNA samples taken at the time of her discovery. They had been stored in a database for missing children, though no matches had ever been found. We need to run a comparison, Robert said urgently, looking up at James. Get me access to those records. Compare them to mine. James nodded. I'll see what I can do. But Mr. Grayson, you should prepare yourself. Even if the DNA matches, this is going to be complicated. She's lived her whole life thinking she's someone else. I know, Robert said quietly. But I have to try. Back at the cafe, Lily sensed that something was changing. Customers whispered among themselves whenever Robert visited, speculating about why such a wealthy man kept returning to their humble establishment. Some joked that he must be sweet on her, while others teased her about becoming rich overnight. Lily brushed it off, telling herself it was none of her business. Still, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that Robert was hiding something. 1. Evening. After the cafe had closed, Lily stayed behind to clean up. As she wiped down tables, she overheard snippets of conversation between two co-workers. They were standing near the counter, unaware that she was still there. "Did you hear?" one of them said in a hushed tone. "That guy? He's been asking about Lily." "What do you mean?" the other replied. "I don't know exactly, but someone said he hired a private investigator or something, like he's digging into her past." Lily froze, her hand gripping the edge of the table. A private investigator? Why would Robert do that? Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of it. Was he suspicious of her? Did he think she'd done something wrong? Or was there another reason? Determined to get answers, Lily waited until the next time Robert visited the cafe. When he finished his meal and stood to leave, she approached him, her expression serious. "We need to talk," she said firmly. Robert turned to face her, his eyes widening slightly. "Of course, what's wrong?" "Don't play dumb with me," Lily snapped, lowering her voice so the other customers wouldn't overhear. "I heard you've been asking questions about me, hiring people to look into my past. Why? What do you want from me?" For a moment, Robert was silent, his face pale. Then he sighed heavily, running a hand through his silver hair. "Lily, please let me explain." "No," she interrupted, her voice trembling with anger. "You explain. Who are you, really? And why are you so interested in me?" Robert hesitated, searching for the right words. Finally, he took a deep breath and said, "Because I think you might be my daughter." The room seemed to spin around Lily. She stared at him, her mouth falling open in shock. What are you talking about?" "It's true," Robert said softly. 20 years ago, I lost my daughter. She disappeared during a family vacation and we never found her. Until now." Lily shook her head, backing away. "No, that's crazy. You're crazy." "I'm not," Robert insisted, stepping closer. "The scar on your wrist, it's from when she was a baby. And the beach where you were found, it's the same place she went missing. Please, Lily, just let me prove it to you." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes as she struggled to process what he was saying. Could it be true? Was this man really her father? Or was he lying, trying to manipulate her for reasons she couldn't understand? "I don't know what to believe," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You don't have to decide right now," Robert said gently. "But I promise you, I'll show you the truth. All I ask is that you give me a chance." Lily looked at him, uncertainty written all over her face. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to leap or turn back. Whatever choice she made, one thing was certain. Her life would never be the same again. The days that followed Robert Grayson's revelation were a whirlwind of emotions for Lily Carter. She didn't know what to think or how to feel. Was this man telling the truth? Could he really be her father? Or was he just another person trying to take advantage of her like so many others had in the past? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the mix of desperation and hope in his eyes when he told her about losing his daughter. It was hard to ignore, but trust wasn't something Lily gave easily. Growing up in foster care had taught her to be cautious, to question everyone's motives. People rarely did things out of kindness. There was always an angle, a hidden agenda. And yet, there was something about Robert that felt different. He didn't seem like the kind of man who needed anything from her. If anything, he seemed like someone who had everything, and yet he looked broken, as if a piece of him had been missing for years. Still, Lily couldn't bring herself to believe him right away. Instead, she decided to test him, to see if he was genuine. The next time he visited the cafe, she greeted him with a polite but distant smile. "You said you'd show me proof," she reminded him, keeping her tone neutral. "When?" Robert nodded, understanding her hesitation. "Soon," he promised. "I'm waiting on some final results, but I want you to know I wouldn't lie. About something like this. Lily didn't respond. She simply turned and walked away, leaving him sitting at his usual table. Inside, though, her heart was racing. What if he was telling the truth? What if this man really was her father? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. For as long as she could remember, she had wondered about her parents, dreamed of finding them someday. But now that the possibility was staring her in the face, she wasn't sure she was ready for it. Meanwhile, James Harper was putting the finishing touches on the investigation. After weeks of digging through old records and navigating bureaucratic red tape, he finally secured access to the DNA database containing samples from children reported missing decades ago. With Robert's permission, he submitted a request to compare Lily's genetic profile against Robert's. When the results came back, James wasted no time calling Robert. They met again in the same quiet restaurant where they had discussed the case before. This time, however, James's expression was one of triumph. "It's a match," he said without preamble, sliding a printed report across the table. "There's no doubt about it. Lily is your daughter." Robert stared at the document, his hands shaking as he read the words over and over again. Tears welled up in his eyes, blurring the ink on the page. For 20 years he had carried the weight of losing Emma, convinced he would never see her again. And now here was proof that she was alive, that she had been found. He felt a surge of emotions, relief, joy, guilt, and fear, all colliding at once. "Thank you," he whispered hoarsely, looking up at James. "You have no idea what this means to me." James nodded sympathetically. Now comes the hard part, telling her. Back at the cafe, Lily noticed that Robert seemed quieter than usual during his next visit. He ordered a coffee but barely touched it, his gaze distant as if lost in thought. When she approached his table to refill his cup, he looked up at her, his expression serious. "I have something to show you," he said softly. "Will you come with me after work?" Lily hesitated, unsure whether to agree. Part of her wanted to refuse, to keep her distance until she figured out what was going on. But another part, a deeper, more vulnerable part, was curious. She nodded slowly. "Okay, but only because I need answers." After her shift ended, Robert waited outside the cafe for her. He led her to a sleek black car parked nearby, holding the door open for her. Lily climbed inside, feeling out of place surrounded by the luxurious leather seats and polished wood accents. As they drove through the city streets, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, charged with unspoken questions and fears. They arrived at a private lab tucked away in a quiet corner of Manhattan. Robert escorted her inside, explaining that they were there to confirm what he had already discovered. A technician greeted them warmly and guided them to a small room where a computer screen displayed the results of the DNA test. "This is Lily's profile," the technician explained, pointing to one set of data. "And this is yours, Mr. Grayson. As you can see, the markers align perfectly. There's no question, they're related." Lily stared at the screen, her breath catching in her throat. Her mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. It was real. This wasn't some elaborate hoax or mistake. She really was Robert's daughter. For a moment she felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. Then anger bubbled to the surface. "Why didn't anyone tell me sooner?" she demanded, turning to Robert. "All these years I thought I was alone. I thought my parents didn't want me." "I'm so sorry," Robert said, his voice breaking. "I thought you were gone forever. I spent years searching for you, doing everything I could to find you. But there was nothing, no leads, no clues. I never stopped hoping, though. Not for a single day." Tears streamed down Lily's face as she struggled to reconcile her feelings. On one hand, she was furious, at fate, at the system that had failed her, at Robert for not finding her sooner. On the other hand, she felt a flicker of something else. Relief. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she had always believed. Over. The next few days, Robert invited Lily to spend time with him, hoping to rebuild the bond they had lost. He offered her a room in his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, promising her freedom to come and go as she pleased. But Lily refused to leave her life behind completely. She still worked at the cafe, still spent time with her friends, unwilling to abandon the people and routines that had shaped her identity. Instead, she agreed to meet Robert for dinner occasionally, allowing him to share stories about her childhood, or what little he remembered of it. He told her about the beach house where they used to vacation, about the tiny scar on her wrist from when she pulled a toy too hard and cut herself. He showed her old photographs yellowed with age, of a smiling baby with bright eyes and chubby cheeks. "You were such a happy child," Robert said wistfully, tracing the edge of one photo with his finger. "Always laughing, always curious. You loved the water even as a baby. We used to sit by the shore and you'd splash around in the waves." Lily listened intently, her heart aching as she realized how much of her life had been erased. She wanted to ask questions, to demand answers about why she had been taken, who had done it, and how she had ended up in foster care. But she knew those answers might never come. Some mysteries remained unsolved no matter how hard you searched. As the weeks passed, their relationship began to evolve. Robert opened up about the pain of losing her, the guilt he carried for not protecting her better. In turn, Lily shared stories of growing up in foster care, moving from home to home, always longing for a sense of belonging. Slowly, they began to form a bond, learning to trust each other again. But challenges arose when word of their reunion leaked to the press. Reporters camped outside the cafe, snapping pictures of Lily and bombarding her with questions. Headlines screamed about the billionaire's long-lost daughter, turning their private story into a public spectacle. For Lily, it was overwhelming. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of her, her coworkers, strangers on social media, even distant relatives she had never met. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of dodging paparazzi, Lily confronted Robert. "Is this what it's going to be like?" she asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "People staring at me, judging me, treating me like some kind of sideshow?" "No," Robert said firmly. "It doesn't have to be. We'll handle this together. Whatever you need, whatever you want, I'll make sure it happens." Lily sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't know what I want anymore. Everything feels upside down." "That's okay," Robert replied gently. "We'll figure it out, one step at a time." Despite the chaos, Lily began to see glimpses of a new life taking shape. Robert introduced her to art galleries, concerts, and charity events, exposing her to a world she had never known existed. At first, she felt out of place, like an imposter, pretending to belong. But gradually, she started to embrace it, realizing that she didn't have to choose between her old life and her new one. She could honor both. In return, Lily introduced Robert to her world, the cozy diner where she ate breakfast with her best friend, the park where she jogged every morning, the bookstore where she browsed novels during her lunch breaks. These moments brought them closer, bridging the gap between their vastly different lives. By the end of the third month, Lily finally felt like she was beginning to understand who she was, not just as Robert's daughter, but as herself. She was strong, resilient, and capable of navigating two worlds. And though scars remained, both physical and emotional, they served as reminders of survival and hope rather than loss. As they stood together on the balcony of Robert's penthouse one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Lily turned to him with a tentative smile. "Do you think we'll ever get used to this?" she asked. "To being family," Robert replied, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Maybe not completely, but I think we're off to a good start." Life had become a balancing act for Lily Carter. On one side, there was the world she had always known, the cafe where she worked, her small apartment filled with thrift store furniture, and her close-knit group of friends who had been her support system for years. On the other side was the new reality she was slowly stepping into, a life of luxury, privilege, and opportunities she could barely comprehend. It wasn't easy to reconcile the two, but Lily was determined to find a way. Robert Grayson did everything he could to make her feel comfortable. He never pressured her to give up her job or distance herself from her old life. Instead, he encouraged her to take her time, to explore this new chapter at her own pace. But even with his patience and understanding, Lily couldn't ignore the challenges that came with being thrust into the spotlight. The media frenzy surrounding their reunion showed no signs of dying down. Reporters followed her everywhere, snapping photos and shouting questions as if she were some kind of celebrity. Strangers approached her on the street, offering congratulations or unsolicited advice. Some people were kind, genuinely happy for her, while others seemed jealous or skeptical. It was exhausting. One afternoon, after a particularly rough day at work, Lily sat in the cafe's break room staring at her hands. Her co-worker, Maria, noticed her distress and pulled up a chair beside her. "You okay?" Maria asked softly. Lily sighed, shaking her head. "I don't know. Sometimes it feels like my whole life is spinning out of control." Maria nodded sympathetically. "It must be tough, having all those cameras and reporters chasing you around. I can't even imagine." "It's not just that," Lily admitted. "It's everything. This whole new world Robert is introducing me to. It's amazing, but it's also overwhelming. I don't want to lose who I am, you know." "You won't," Maria said firmly. "No matter what happens, you're still Lily. Just because your last name might change or you start wearing fancier clothes doesn't mean you stop being the same person. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Lily smiled faintly, grateful for Maria's words. She knew her friend was right. Still, it was hard not to feel torn between two worlds, each pulling her in opposite directions. That evening, when Lily arrived at Robert's penthouse, she found him pacing back and forth in the living room, his phone pressed to his ear. He glanced up when she entered, mouthing an apology before continuing his conversation. From what Lily could gather, he was speaking to someone about arranging security details to protect her from the relentless paparazzi. When he finally hung up, he turned to her with a look of concern. "I'm sorry about today," he said. "I've been trying to figure out how to handle the press. They're relentless, and I hate seeing you go through this." "It's not your fault," Lily replied, sitting down on the couch. "But it's hard. Everyone acts like they know me, like they have a right to comment on my life. And honestly, sometimes I feel like I don't even know myself anymore." Robert sat beside her, placing a hand on hers. "I wish I could fix this for you. I wish I could turn back time and make sure none of this ever happened. But I can't. All I can do is promise to stand by you no matter what." Lily looked at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. What she saw was raw emotion, pain, regret, and love. For the first time since their reunion, she allowed herself to fully believe that he truly cared about her, not just as his long-lost daughter, but as a person. "I think I need to set some boundaries," Lily said after a moment. "With the press, with everyone. I can't keep letting them dictate my life." Robert nodded. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. If you want to issue a statement, hire a PR team, or just lay low for a while, we'll make it happen." Together, they spent the next few days crafting a plan. With Robert's help, Lily hired a public relations expert to manage the media attention. The PR team issued a brief statement confirming the story of her discovery and reunion with her father, emphasizing her desire for privacy during this emotional time. They also arranged for discreet security measures to ensure Lily's safety, without drawing unnecessary attention. At first, the strategy worked. The constant barrage of reporters began to ease, giving Lily a chance to catch her breath. She started spending more time with Robert, getting to know him better, and learning about the family she had lost. He introduced her to art galleries, museums, and charity events, exposing her to aspects of his life she had never imagined. In return, she invited him to join her for simple pleasures: picnics in the park, movie nights at her apartment, and lazy afternoons at the bookstore. Through these shared experiences, their bond grew stronger. Robert shared stories about his late wife Sarah, Lily's mother, painting a picture of a warm, loving woman who would have adored her daughter. He described their dreams for the future, dreams that had been shattered when Lily disappeared. Hearing these stories made Lily ache with sadness, but it also helped her understand the depth of her father's love. In turn, Lily opened up about her own struggles, growing up in foster care, feeling abandoned and unwanted, and the resilience she had developed along the way. She told him about the families who had taken her in only to send her away again, the loneliness of moving from school to school, and the determination that had kept her going despite it all. "You're so strong," Robert said one evening as they sat together on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below. "I don't know how you managed to stay so brave through everything." "I didn't have a choice," Lily replied with a shrug. "It's funny, people always say I'm resilient, but I don't feel that way. I just did what I had to do to survive." "Well, I'm proud of you," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I promise you'll never have to fight alone again." As weeks turned into months, Lily began to settle into her dual identity. She continued working at the cafe, refusing to abandon the job and coworkers she loved. At the same time, she embraced the privileges her newfound status afforded her, using them to pursue passions she had once thought were out of reach. With Robert's encouragement, she enrolled in community college, taking classes in business and psychology. She dreamed of one day starting her own nonprofit organization to help children in foster care find permanent homes. Robert supported her ambitions wholeheartedly, offering guidance and resources whenever she needed them. Together, they began brainstorming ideas for programs that could provide mentorship, education, and financial assistance to kids aging out of the foster care system. It was a cause close to both their hearts, born out of Lily's experiences and Robert's desire to give back. Their efforts culminated in the launch of a foundation called Hope Reimagined. The organization aimed to bridge the gap between foster care and independent adulthood, providing young people with the tools and support they needed to succeed. At the inaugural gala, held in a grand ballroom overlooking the city, Lily stood beside Robert as he addressed the crowd. "Tonight," he said, his voice steady and heartfelt, "we celebrate second chances. My daughter, Lily, represents everything. This foundation stands for resilience, hope, and the power of connection. Together we can ensure that no child feels forgotten or left behind." The audience erupted in applause and Lily felt tears welling up in her eyes. For so long she had carried the weight of her past, believing she was destined to remain invisible. Now, standing here beside her father, she realized she had the strength to rewrite her story, and perhaps help others do the same. Despite the progress they had made, Lily and Robert knew their journey was far from over. There were still moments of tension, times when old wounds resurfaced or misunderstandings arose. But through it all, they remained committed to building a relationship based on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. One evening, as they walked along the beach where Lily had been found as a child, Robert stopped suddenly and turned to her. "Do you remember the first time we met?" he asked. Lily laughed softly. "How could I forget? You were sitting in that cafe looking completely out of place. And now look at us," Robert said, gesturing toward the waves lapping at the shore. "We've come such a long way." "We have," Lily agreed, smiling. "But we're not done yet. We've got a lot more to learn about each other." Robert nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's true. But whatever comes next, I'm glad we're facing it together." As they continued walking, the sun dipping below the horizon, Lily felt a sense of peace wash over her. For the first time in her life, she truly believed she belonged. Not just to one world or another, but to herself. And with Robert by her side, she knew she could face whatever the future held. The months passed quickly, and Lily Carter found herself settling into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. She was no longer the same person she had been before meeting Robert Grayson, but she wasn't entirely different either. Instead, she had grown into someone who could embrace both sides of her life, the simplicity of her past and the opportunities of her present. Her studies at community college were going well, and she threw herself into her classes with enthusiasm. Business principles fascinated her, especially when it came to understanding how organizations could create meaningful change. Psychology, on the other hand, gave her insight into her own experiences and helped her connect with others who had faced similar struggles. It was empowering to realize that her hardships weren't just obstacles. They were lessons that shaped her into the person she was today. Meanwhile, Hope Reimagined, the foundation she and Robert had launched, was gaining momentum. The gala had been a huge success, raising enough funds to kickstart several programs aimed at supporting foster youth. Lily took an active role in overseeing these initiatives, visiting group homes, mentoring teenagers, and speaking at events to raise awareness about the challenges faced by kids in the system. Seeing the impact they were making filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't known she was missing. But despite the progress, there were still moments when Lily struggled. Adjusting to her new identity as the daughter of a billionaire wasn't easy. Some days she felt like she was living in two separate worlds, one where she was just Lily, the waitress from the cafe, and another where she was Emma Grayson, heir to a vast fortune. People treated her differently now, some with admiration, others with envy or skepticism. It was hard not to let those opinions affect her. One afternoon, after a particularly draining day of meetings and interviews, Lily decided to visit Maria, her co-worker and best friend, at the cafe. Sitting in their usual booth, sipping coffee, and sharing stories, she felt a wave of nostalgia wash over her. This place, with its mismatched chairs and faint smell of baked goods, had been her sanctuary for years. No matter how much her life changed, this little corner of the world would always feel like home. "You seem stressed," Maria observed, leaning forward. "What's going on?" Lily sighed, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "It's just everything. Sometimes I feel like I'm being pulled in a million directions, like I have to prove myself to everyone." Maria frowned. "Prove what? That you belong?" "Lily, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're amazing just the way you are." "I know," Lily said softly. "But it's not that simple. Half the time I feel like people only see me as Robert Grayson's daughter. They don't see me." "Well, screw them," Maria said firmly, earning a surprised laugh from Lily. "You've worked too hard to let anyone define you. If they can't see past your last name, then that's their problem, not yours." Lily smiled, grateful for her friend's unwavering support. Talking to Maria always reminded her of who she was at her core, someone strong, independent, and kind. No amount of money or fame could change that. That evening, Lily met Robert at his penthouse for dinner. He greeted her warmly, handing her a glass of sparkling water as they settled onto the balcony overlooking the city. The lights twinkled below like stars scattered across the horizon. "How was your day?" Robert asked, noticing the faint tension in her shoulders. "It was busy," Lily admitted. "I guess I'm still figuring out how to balance everything." Robert nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's a lot to take on, isn't it? Being thrust into this world overnight, I wish I could make it easier for you." "You already have," Lily said quickly. "Just by being here, by supporting me through all of this, but sometimes I wonder if I'll ever truly feel like I fit in." Robert reached across the table, placing a hand over hers. "You don't have to fit in, Lily. You get to decide who you want to be. Don't let anyone, including me, dictate that for you." His words struck a chord deep within her. For so long, she had been searching for a sense of belonging, desperate to find her place in the world. But maybe belonging wasn't about fitting into a specific mold. Maybe it was about creating your own space, one that reflected who you truly were. Over the next few weeks, Lily made a conscious effort to focus on what mattered most to her. She scaled back on unnecessary commitments, choosing instead to invest her energy in things that brought her joy. Spending time with friends, volunteering at the foundation, and pursuing her education. Slowly, she began to feel more grounded, more confident in her ability to navigate her dual identities without losing herself in the process. As spring turned into summer, Lily and Robert planned a trip to Maine, the place where she had been found as a child. It was a journey neither of them had taken since that fateful day 20 years ago, and while it stirred up painful memories, it also felt necessary. They arrived early one morning, the salty breeze carrying the scent of the ocean. The beach was quiet, untouched by the chaos of the city. Together, they walked along the shoreline, their footsteps sinking into the soft sand. Lily paused near a cluster of rocks, staring out at the waves. "This is where they found me," she said quietly, breaking the silence. Robert nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I used to come here every year, hoping against hope that you'd somehow return. Even after everyone told me to move on, I couldn't let go. Lily turned to look at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for never giving up." They stood there for a long time, letting the sound of the waves wash over them. Eventually, Lily bent down and picked up a smooth stone, holding it tightly in her palm. "Do you think we'll ever really understand why things happen the way they do?" she asked. "Maybe not," Robert replied. "But I do believe that everything happens for a reason. Losing you nearly destroyed me, but finding you again has given me a second chance. A chance to be the father I should have been all along." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes as she hugged him tightly. In that moment, she realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about embracing the present and looking forward to the future. Back in New York, life continued to unfold. In unexpected ways, Lily graduated from community college with honors, a proud milestone that brought tears to Robert's eyes during the ceremony. She decided to transfer to a university to pursue a degree in social work, determined to use her experiences to help others. At the same time, Hope Reimagined expanded its reach, partnering with schools, businesses, and government agencies to create lasting change for foster youth. Through it all, Lily remained true to herself. She kept her job at the Cafe, cherishing the camaraderie and simplicity it offered. She stayed close to her friends, refusing to let wealth or fame come between them. And she maintained a strong bond with Robert, learning to trust him completely while forging her own path. On a crisp autumn evening, as they strolled through Central Park together, Robert glanced at Lily with pride. "You've grown so much," he said. "I'm amazed by the woman you've become." Lily smiled, looping her arm through his. "We've both grown," she replied, "and we've got a lot more growing to do." Robert chuckled, nodding in agreement. "Whatever comes, next I'm glad we're facing it together." As they walked side by side, leaves crunching beneath their feet, Lily felt a profound sense of peace. The scars of her past would always remain, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they served as reminders of her resilience, her strength, and the unbreakable bond she shared with her father. For the first time in her life, Lily knew exactly who she was, and she couldn't wait to see where the future would take her.